When they obviously reach perimenopause and menopause, it's obviously a lot harder. And that's why we sort of like to say it's not just a calories in versus calories out sort of approach. We do the blood testing because it lets us take out the guesswork. Like, we know estrogen levels are going to fluctuate. We know progesterone is going to be the first thing that starts going sort of lower. And in turn, like, those will have knock-on effects with other systems in the body. So there's a lot of different factors that sort of cause that weight loss resistance. It's not just a case of us saying to somebody, you just need to eat a little bit less or move a little bit more, unfortunately. That's sort of what culture has told us to do. But they don't sort of look at metabolic system, how stress has an impact, how hormones have an impact. There's so many different things that can stop somebody effectively getting to that goal.
Hello, so today's guest is Matt Jones. He's the owner of Rebalance, which is a women's hormone testing company. We're getting into why the standard GP blood panel barely scratches the surface, why some women go on HRT and actually feel worse because their body can't actually clear the extra estrogen, and why you can have estrogen dominance symptoms even when your estrogen is low, and why so many women in perimenopause are really trying hard to lose fat by eating less calories and over exercising, but they're still not able. So this conversation really gives us a lot of important answers. I hope you enjoy this and find it as insightful as I did. Enjoy the episode and I'll see you soon. Hello, welcome Matt. Very, very much looking forward to this recording. We're really going to dive into the testing piece, but first I'll let you introduce yourself and we can get straight into the questions.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the invite. I'm Matt, the owner of Rebalance, a women's hormone testing company. So we do blood testing, coaching, and just everything female health orientated, really.
Amazing. The first question I wanted to hit you with, because from everything I've researched of you, it seems like obviously you're in the really granular piece, really getting it right with people who have done, like a lot of people listening to this, done a lot of the basics, and now they're drilling into the testing and the more specific things. Mm-hmm. So maybe if we start on that, because let's look at the woman who at the moment is experiencing, we say, perimenopause symptoms, weight loss resistance. She's really in the thick of feeling really dysregulated, and a lot of things that used to work don't. Mm-hmm. So when that kind of archetype comes to you, what happens in terms of testing, and what does that look like in order to uncover the root causes and then actually find practical solutions?
Yeah, so it's obviously a lot more sort of research now than it was maybe sort of 20, 30 years ago. The average woman will try exactly what she's tried sort of when she's in her 20s or 30s. And unfortunately, when they obviously reach perimenopause and menopause, it's obviously a lot harder. And that's why we sort of like to say it's not just a calories in versus calories out sort of approach. We do the blood testing because it lets us take out the guesswork. Like, we know estrogen levels are going to fluctuate. We know progesterone is going to be the first thing that starts going sort of lower. And in turn, like, those will have knock-on effects with other systems in the body. So we know estrogen helps with like our insulin sensitivity, for example. If that starts going out the window, effectively higher insulin levels, then fat storage is going to be sort of more around the midsection and waist. Our body's ability to sort of oxidize its fat as well is obviously going to be inhibited. So there's a lot of different factors that sort of cause that weight loss resistance. It's not just a case of us saying to somebody, you just need to eat a little bit less or move a little bit more, unfortunately. That's sort of what culture has told us to do. But they don't sort of look at metabolic system, how stress has an impact, how hormones have an impact. There's so many different things that can stop somebody effectively getting to that goal. And that's why we do the blood testing as a start point, just so we can fully see exactly what's going on there and then we can start getting to work in terms of specific protocols to fix what we find, basically.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you say that, and it's so matter of fact in the sense that we know the science now. We know that there's so many interactions that mean, say you're eating 1,700 calories before perimenopause, then you eat the same 1,700 calories, but the way that creates fat, the way your metabolism functions is different. So I think we're really drilled into being guilty, because a woman would feel extremely guilty if they didn't understand what you just said, which a lot of people don't. And even understanding, now there is not that many people you can go to that will be able to give you the correct blood tests. There's obviously the generic ones that everyone says, I got my thyroid panel and, a few other bits and bobs. But people are really in the dark about the testing that you could do versus the testing that's the generic ones that are normally offered, we'll say, in a GP surgery. So I think that's in itself really important to pause and look at, to think, wow, like a lot of people don't know this and they're really struggling with, we'll say, fat loss resistance, but they don't understand the piece around what's happening with estrogen and blood sugar balance or anything to do with thyroid function. So I think, yeah, that's like valuable to really understand that and know the tests that are available that a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, 100%. And it is, obviously GPs do a wonderful job in a lot of things, but like when they go to get testing done, they only tend to maybe do a few markers out of a full picture. Like if we take your thyroid, for instance, like you'll be lucky if you get anything more than just TSH, and maybe if you're lucky 3T4. But like that doesn't tell us an awful lot in terms of like, is it converting to our 3T3 properly, like our active thyroid metabolism? So like things like that, almost it's the missing picture that we need to see. And a lot of the time they'll just do the bog standard ones because maybe they don't know how to help improve or sort of like help the client actually fix the issues, rather than just saying, here's some HRT or go back on birth control. Like there's so many different things we can do naturally to actually fix hormonal dysfunctions or metabolic problems, rather than just saying to somebody, take like a pill or put a plaster over it to stop sort of the problem short term. But obviously it doesn't fix that sort of long-term root cause of it as well.
It's interesting. I looked at one of your posts recently and it was the list of like an extensive list of tests that you can avail of. And it really made me stop and think, because a lot of people, when they saw the list, it would be overwhelming because you're very unfamiliar with all the abbreviations and terms. But it is a thing of, if women could understand that there's actually not that, there isn't a huge amount that you really need to understand. It's like the basics of testing. Then you're much more likely to actually get the testing done because it's not so overwhelming. That really came to me. Like a lot of people shy away from getting testing done because when they look at, even when you talked there about the different thyroid tests, a lot of people would have no idea about the interaction between T3 and T4. So like that kind of basic understanding is going to make you much more likely to get the right testing done as well when you understand what's out there.
Yeah, 100%. And it's unfortunate that it's not sort of out there and readily available for people to understand. But like there's a lot of places that will just do the tests and not explain anything to do with what the results mean and just give you loads of confusing numbers, where we sort of like to write a full report and often jump on a call with the client just to make sure they understand exactly what the results mean. So we can sort of make it client friendly rather than just giving somebody loads of confusing numbers and telling them everything's out of whack. It's okay, it's out of whack, but this is the reason why, and then this is what we need to do to sort of fix the issue and improve what we find from the testing.
Yeah, I think we're at a really pivotal point now, because a lot of practices now, of course, do the interpretation. So you understand the numbers and you're not just getting something that's numerical and you have no idea how to interpret. So I think we're definitely at a point where that's becoming, much more common, because it's crazy to think you give results to someone and they can't interpret them themselves. But also understanding that you do have to understand that, yes, there are a lot of really good facilities to do that, but also understanding that there's also lots of facilities that don't do it. So you do have to be very mindful of the responsibility on you as well to understand what you really need for the situation you're in.
Yeah, 100%. It's why we tend to recommend to everybody that they just get like a full panel done when we do our testing, rather than just hormone health or just thyroid health. Like it's all well and good knowing that, but like we need to pair things together. So like we need to look at your liver function as well. Like we need to look at sort of inflammation in your body and see how that's all connected. So it is normally why we recommend having a full panel as an all-in-one, rather than sort of having bits and bits and bits, because if you get a full panel, it tells us everything we need to know.
And what are the things that are regularly coming up for that woman in her 40s who comes to you, who's having all the kind of typical perimenopause symptoms, plus more, quite fatigued, body changing, and mental health a lot of the time is really in a difficult position, because even if estrogen's declining, that stress buffer isn't there as much as it used to be. What are you seeing a lot when you are doing the testing, the typical tests that come back that show maybe, it's still in the normal range, but it's suboptimal? Or what are the tests that you would regularly see come back that are kind of concerning that you really need to address?
Yeah, we see quite a lot of thyroid function come back, either overactive or underactive. We tend to see just in general terms. Obviously, perimenopause or menopausal women, they tend to be sort of in charge of everything. There's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of stress on somebody. So over a long duration of time, it does have a knock-on effect. So we see quite a lot of metabolic stress on patients that come in. Hormonal levels is obviously a massive one as well. We know obviously our estrogen is going to fluctuate, but it's not sort of a blanket sort of statement in terms of everybody's got decline in estrogen or everybody's got sort of decline in progesterone. Like sometimes it is like we may see an estrogen dominant woman just because our progesterone is so low, for example. So it is trying to look at everybody as an individual case rather than putting blankets over it. Yeah, so back to the question, it is mainly just hormonal thyroid levels. We tend to see liver health tends to be a massive one because there's a massive buzz on gut health and obviously lower inflammation, but nobody ever thinks, oh, I'm going to look after my liver health. So
yeah, let's go on that for a moment, because there's so little talk about liver health and, you know, liver overload and endocrine disruptors and all the different things around the liver that are misunderstood. I think most people just think of the liver and think of alcohol. Oh, I better cut down my alcohol. And that's really all. The odd person will say, oh, I better have more bitters. But why is the liver such an important piece of this? And why is it so under talked about and misunderstood?
yeah, I guess people just don't really know what roles it sort of does, really. Like people don't realize how much it, like our thyroid conversion happens in our liver. Like it helps detox our hormones. It helps get rid of our inflammation in terms of the detox system as well. And people don't realize, like, if that's off, like it slows everything down. And especially when we sort of dive into a lot more detail in terms of looking at our hormone levels. And I'm not sure if you're sort of familiar with it, like the Dutch testing, for instance, as well. That really goes into like how your hormones are like metabolized in your body and detox. So like what pathways it's going down. So we need to see our liver working well. So all of these factors in terms of hormonal health are working as well. Obviously bloods are really good and important, but they do just give us that snapshot, especially in hormonal health. But like when you dive into the way that the body's detoxing it and metabolizing it and what it actually does after they're active and turns it into the inactive form, then that's where you really sort of see almost the different layer of what your hormones are actually doing in the body. So yeah, it is a massively important sort of system and often just gets mislooked because nobody really knows how to sort of help with their liver health.
Let's get into that. How do we help the liver health? Because you explained that so succinctly a moment ago when you talked about all the different uses of the liver in terms of metabolizing hormones. So I think let's get into that part, because there's definitely a lot more load on our liver in the last few decades than there were. But even the other day I put up a post and it was like, you know, don't spray perfume on your skin.
Yeah.
And it was like, who's going to do this? And I think it was like 50-50. There was like thousands of volts. And I was like, what?
Yeah, it is.
You know, I was just like shocked. People are just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's hard to say somebody to change something that they've obviously been doing for a long time or sort of may think it's only a spray.
I was like, spray it on your clothes though.
Yeah.
Not your skin.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like they probably think, oh, it's such a small thing, like it's not going to do anything. But yeah, there's obviously a lot of different things that we can do. There's obviously supplements helping with like our bile production and obviously gallbladder as well. But nutrition's a massive one. Like it just massively thrives on making sure we get the right amount of amino acids in our body, for example. A lot of obviously protein is another buzzword that people tend to go for. But it tends to be just sort of looking at, have we had enough chicken today, or like, is there enough eggs, where we need to make sure we do get that sort of full amino profile in. Obviously helping with not drinking alcohol, that's quite a big one. Obviously it's easier said than done, but it does cause, it is basically like a poison to our liver. So it's something that we do try and want to avoid as much as possible. High sort of...
What about coffee?
Yeah, coffee's one where I say, like, obviously everybody does like a drink of coffee, and maybe one coffee or two coffees a day isn't going to be too sort of strenuous on it. But I think just general overall nutrition in terms of making sure we're eating our green veg, broccoli, sort of spinach, cauliflower, that side of things, making sure we're having sulfur-rich foods as well. So like garlic, onions, that's going to massively help improve our liver health as well. And it sounds silly, but from experience, like we like to do almost like not like a restricted sort of detox, but like almost like a reset on it. So like we sort of say to a client, look, this is what we're going to do for like 4 to 6 weeks. We're going to give everybody a nice sort of clean slate with it. And then we know it's in a good place to then start working the way we want. So that's when we're sort of manipulating their nutrition in a lot more detail, like supplementation in a lot more detail. Especially with supplements, it's not something we want to take forever and ever and ever. So like we say like a nice sort of detox gets it working the way we want, and then we can handle it with our nutrition and lifestyle changes.
And the detox will be making sure that there's, you know, all the macros, you're hydrating more effectively, you're eating more minerals, vitamins from your from your food, and then also supplementation, dim supplement, taking bitters. What else is involved in it?
Yeah, bitter supplements are really good. Helping with bile production is really good as well. High fibre foods is going to help massively too. Bitter foods in terms of, like I said, it's massively important for our bile flow. So like we need to make sure we're getting at least like, or some nice easy ones like rocket, dandelion leaves. Obviously they may sound a little bit weird to sort of add into our everyday life, but you can obviously just get them in supplement form, which is nice and easy to take daily. But yeah, like I said, it's something that milk thistle is a really good supplement that we recommend too. It's nice and easy. It's quite a cheap supplement. DIM, we only tend to like to recommend that just when we can sort of manage the dosage a little bit more. You do need to be a little bit careful with sort of a lot of people take too much, which can sort of have that not very nice after effect. But yeah, like I said, it's something that you do need to focus on, and once you start improving that, like I said, your whole detox system in your body is going to work a lot better than obviously beforehand.
Yeah, because I think the bitter piece you just mentioned as well, like we're about to see loads of dandelions everywhere. You can literally just eat the leaves of the dandelions.
Yeah, it's
It's
easy
really
as
as
that.
simple as that. Because I went to a growing course at the weekend and we spoke about like medicinal herbs and vegetables, and I was like, whoa, a lot of these, like even nettles in your garden, it's so easy to make nettle soup. It's so easy to put the leaves of dandelions in your salad. There's so many ways to have more of them bitters, and they're very accessible. You just need to open up your mind to all the things that are like to you like a weed.
Yeah, yeah, and people wouldn't sort of necessarily think to add that in day to day, really, would they?
Exactly.
Like without the education, nobody's going to say, I'm just going to go to the garden and pick some nettles and eat that.
Exactly. And there was actually a herbalist there, and she said all the time from now on for the coming months, she will pick the nettles and dry them and, you know, make them into what looks like herbs, but also she'll put them in her water every day, steep them in the fridge and drink the nettle water, which tastes fine, you know. And I just thought that was really interesting. Like she has a really small garden, so she couldn't grow loads of things, but she was able to do things like that, which are so beneficial for, she was in, you know, really experiencing the depths of menopause. And she was like, I'm finding every single way through herbs and food to get the best results. But of course, she was very mindful as well that she could be eating such an amount of nutrient dense and mineral dense foods, but the stress piece is so key. Otherwise, you're not digesting or absorbing as enough of the nutrients anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like that balance, that balancing act, but
Yeah, and it's
both help each other.
yeah, and it's trying to get somebody to sort of do it on the daily as well. Like people would just be like, oh, I'll do it once a week or every, like maybe when I just think about it, it's something that does need to try and be added as a day-to-day thing. Like even when we sort of look at like your thyroid health, for example, like we always recommend, say, iodine and selenium. And that's not something we just recommend as like a once a week thing. Like it needs to be every single day.
And nuanced with the dose as well. When I had that kind of underactive thyroid, it was subclinical, but I had to be careful with the levels of iodine I was consuming, because it's very easy to say, I'll just take a kelp supplement, but then you have too much. And that's
if you overdo it, it could be just as bad.
Exactly. And I think there's so many pieces of this that people just say, oh, look, I'll take the supplement and I'll be covered. But maybe they're eating a good amount of food that has that supplement in it anyway. So it's been careful as well, because I know I saw you speak about dosage and how nuanced it is for the individuals, which I think a lot of people see supplements as just covering them, and they kind of just take the multivitamin and the probiotic, and maybe now they're going to throw in a DIM supplement and a kelp supplement, but not what their body actually needs.
Yeah, and people spend a fortune on supplements without actually testing what, like you said, what they need, which is, again, just something we recommend. Like, you get an MOT on your car every single year. Like, why isn't it something you get on yourself? People spend hundreds a month on supplements. Like I said, it could be overdosing in them. It could be not getting enough. And it obviously is kind of expensive testing wise, but I feel a lot of people would still spend that money elsewhere and think that side of things is more important. Like, they wouldn't spend, say, £100 on a test, but they spend £100 a month on supplements they don't know if they need.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think as well, with the testing piece, to me, testing is usually like a shortcut.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of me having to go blind through a route, I know exactly the destination because I've tested for it. I know exactly what needs to be done, because I went through exactly what you described for so many years of not really testing, because I was like, oh God, it's a couple of €100. I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. But I was sinking that in health food shops every week or every month anyways.
Yeah.
So it's important, like, depending on the location. I know people listening to this are absolutely everywhere globally, but now so much of it's online as well that it's possible to get testing, way more specific testing, so you know exactly what you really need to do. And I'm sure for you as well, it boils down a lot of who you work with. Mm-hmm. What you see in the tests is how much stress is interacting with their, maybe perimenopause symptoms or their ability to digest food properly. And that is probably something as well that's a little bit trickier to deal with, because people love the specifics of, here's the diet you're supposed to be eating, here's the exercise you're supposed to be doing, here's the supplements you're supposed to be taking. Mm-hmm. Amazing. People love that. But when it comes to then the stress piece, it's like almost, it feels like the boring piece, because you do have to be incredibly repetitive and consistent with it.
Yeah, 100%. And like when you look at that stress, for example, like, it isn't just a case of saying to somebody you need to relax more or chill out more.
No.
Like, there's so much more to it. And I feel when people look at that and say, oh, my stress levels are high, like, I can't relax, it's not that. Like, you need to look at lifestyle and nutrition, like sleep, like what you're actually doing to your body to damage it, rather than just thinking you're stressed from a bad day at work or obviously life problems. Like, so much other factors can cause stress on the body. And I don't think people realize sort of how important looking at each thing is. Just sort of isolate it as just having a bad day at work.
Yeah, it's funny as well when you look at the word stress, like, it's coming from maybe blood sugar imbalance, mm-hmm. Even a slight sleep deficit. It's coming from the wrong exercise on your body. Mm-hmm. It's coming from the wrong food. There's so many pieces of stress that aren't just psychological, mental stress. There's so much things that even lack of daylight in the morning, that's a stress on the body. Blue light in bed, that's stress on the body. So it's like sitting down. I do this very regularly just to check in with what's going on every month. I'm like, okay, what are the stresses I can remove? And a lot of the time I do, it's like almost society is made for these stressors to be in place. And you have to actively remove them. Like, you have to make conscious effort in the morning to get out in the sun, the daylight. Mm-hmm. Extremely important. Same with getting the phone out of the bedroom. Really hard. But it's kind of like being really aware that there's even the blood sugar balance piece. A lot of people have eaten in a way for a long time that's maybe carb heavy, maybe protein is low, maybe minerals are low. So again, that's stress on the body for maybe a long time. And it's slowly adding back in the nutrients, your circadian health improving with the sun. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of things that people don't realize are actually really putting a lot of stress in the body.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just another factor that, like I said, you need to address everything as a whole, rather than just sort of saying, yeah, just relax, de-stress, it's easy.
That is so stressful to hear, like, just chill.
Yeah, just chill. And I think it is a lot harder for, like, we sort of started on, like, perimenopausal or menopausal women, because they do have to do a lot. Like, they have to work, they have to look after the kids. Obviously, there is some scenarios where that's not the case, but 9 times out of 10, like, they are sort of that key figure and, like, have to sort of look after everyone almost. And I feel
sandwich years. I was saying that the other day. A woman in perimenopause said it's like the sandwich years, because you're looking after your parents, your kids, your career is probably up a notch as well.
Yeah.
Plus, you have less stress buffer because of the way your hormones are declining.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah, progesterone is obviously one of the first things that starts going. We know progesterone is like our relaxing, calming hormone. Like, if we're less resilient to stress, like, well, obviously it's not a good thing. So it is something where you need to sort of look at them, every single factor, and make sure that we do address like our nutrition. We're making sure we're eating the right foods, fiber, protein. Like, everybody sort of mentions like the protein side of things, but like fiber is getting a little bit more limelight now. It is funny to sort of
finally,
see,
yeah.
like it does switch. Like, everybody's like low carb, protein, now it's fiber. And it's almost like that trend that sort of comes in. And there's a lot of things online, like you'll see people standing on vibration plates and red light therapy and stuff like that. But I think that's like a very small percentage of what you should be focusing on first. And like you mentioned, like our sleep, getting out in the morning, trying to do less stressful activity, like telling a middle-aged woman to do 100 burpees every single day probably isn't a good idea. But telling a middle-aged woman to strength train and improve her lean muscle mass, like, that's going to make sure that we're a lot more sort of that fat burning mode, rather than like long term, rather than overstressing the body, high intensity workouts. And 9 times out of 10, like, most people don't tend to eat up to their sort of maintenance calories. Like, they'll be in a deficit for a very, very long time. So our body's clever, and although it doesn't go sort of into starvation mode, like, it is something where it will slow down everything. So we'll feel a lot more tired. We maybe want to take the lift instead of the stairs, just without even thinking about it. Like, it will adapt. So we just need to make sure that that added stress isn't something that we sort of cause every single day. And like I said, it's something we can fit into our lives quite easily once you get into that routine.
I think that's interesting what you said, that point about it's not necessarily that your metabolism is shot as you hit into your 40s and 50s. It's what's happening behaviorally because of, you're more fatigued because of the hormone drop or fluctuation. You also realize as well your stress tolerance is less. There's so many things going on that are making you maybe have less output. And also because of the blood sugar change and, estrogen maybe in decline, plus you have less muscle in your body unless you're really actively trying to maintain your lean muscle mass. There's so many reasons why fat gain can happen, which seem actually really mysterious at the time, because maybe your diet hasn't changed at all, but your ability to balance blood sugars, your amount of lean muscle mass, that's changing. So I think that's really confusing to a lot of people, because they've been told, really drilled into us, just get into a deficit. And they're like, but how am I meant to get into a deficit if, your hunger is ramped up? Because as well, like, everything that's happening, your gut is changing in your 40s and 50s. That's going to affect your hunger levels. So I think there's like that level of awareness needs to be addressed, and also understood that it is so much more than just it's very hard to black and white this with just the calories in out.
Yeah. And like you mentioned on the gut health side of things as well, like, it is obviously something people are more aware of, looking after gut health. But a lot of intolerance tests and things like that, I always say, like, there's a root cause of why they're getting flagged up and why we're having the problem. A lot of it could be hormonal issues, metabolic issues. Your gut hasn't just decided one day that, okay, cool, I'm going to have a massive reaction to onions or garlic, for example. Like, it is something where histamine problems can happen, like inflammation can cause obviously poor gut health too. So we need to sort of look at every single factor in terms. And like I said, it's obviously nice to test. Fortunately, gut tests are very, very expensive, and not obviously accessible to everybody. But we had a woman the other day, and we did a gut test on her, and like, we picked up E. coli for example, and that's something she'd been dealing with for God knows how long. So all her gut lining is going to be completely shot, like her bacteria, her microbiome is going to be all over the place, and that's going to cause all sorts of problems. And if she had left that, say, 6-7 years down the line, then it's something where it probably would have been a lot harder to fix than it is now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are going around with different gut issues under the bracket of IBS, And because they got the label of IBS, they're like, okay, I know what it is, but that's like the most generic term
Yeah.
ever
Yeah.
for all the gut issues. And I had a friend and she was abroad and she had a parasite for months and she didn't realize why, her gut was in such, it was just felt so damaged. Like she couldn't digest food properly. Her hunger was gone. There was so much to it, but she had to search to get the right testing done to figure that out, which to me was so crazy at the time because, you would think that's quite a straightforward thing. But again, as you say, gut health testing can be expensive, but also can be really confusing because, yeah, I suppose if you talk about why it can be so confusing to people and why so much people probably have SIBO, don't know about it, and a whole host of other gut issues.
Yeah. And SIBO and leaky gut are massive things we pick up from it, to be honest. Like even with a lot of women that are like excess levels of like estrogen, for example, like they don't realize how much that plays into poor gut health as well. Like all that sort of floating around for estrogen is not going to be friendly to our gut. So it's, like I said, something that can relate. It's why we see a lot of women with endometriosis, for example, have poor gut health as well. And it isn't just a case of telling somebody to not eat gluten or not eat dairy or don't eat onions or garlic like for the rest of their life. Like it is something you can fix effectively, but you just need to do it in a sustainable way and make sure we start from almost like afresh. I always say to sort of our patients, like, well, obviously some people do, but most of us tend not to have gut problems when we're like in our like early teens or like early 20s, because our gut's still relatively quite new and it hasn't been exposed to loads of rubbish. But when we get into our 30s and 40s, like that tends to be when most of the problems start to happen, just because we've exposed it, we've not looked after it. Obviously all the hormonal factors and different outside factors as well. That's what tends to be the root cause of it, rather than you just randomly waking up and not being able to eat onions for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's definitely a build-up effect. And just in the specifics of that, so a woman that would see they have estrogen dominance, low progesterone, what are some of the root causes of that, of getting to that situation where your estrogen's really high, your liver isn't detoxing it, it's just free in the body?
What was you say was the cause of it? Sorry.
Yeah, what are the typical like behavioral things women are doing that do have estrogen dominance? Because a lot of the time I think when we talk about perimenopause, they just expect that their estrogen's going to plummet. But then of course there are lots of women with, all the signs of estrogen dominance.
Yeah, so one of the main factors we see is, like I said, sort of progesterone tends to be that first one that starts to maybe decline. Progesterone and estrogen, they need to have that sort of almost balance off each other. And we can be estrogen dominant without having particularly high levels. If our progesterone is absolutely tanked, that would still give us estrogen dominant symptoms and our body would still effectively act as if it's estrogen dominant. So because, again, relating back to that sort of stress and sort of high inflammation on the body, that can have a massive effect on our progesterone levels as well. So we almost, when we're with our progesterone, for example, when we look at the Dutch test, it goes down through two pathways like I was sort of speaking before. One's obviously nice, the other one's quite sensitive and causes a lot of nervous system problems. So like if that's shot and high stress, high prolactin levels maybe, all of that is going to have a knock-on effect with making our progesterone deficient. If our progesterone is deficient, then we're going to have that sort of high estrogen dominance as well. And especially if our, like you said, liver's not fully detoxing it properly, our gut health's not getting rid of the excess as well, then it tends to be why we tend to see some perimenopausal women have that estrogen dominance too. That's why, again, I'm not trying to badmouth people, but it is a little bit frustrating when a woman just goes into the GP and asks for HRT. They give her more estrogen. They could be completely dominant already.
That's a great point.
And cause way more issues than they did to start with. That's why some women have a good response to it, because maybe they actually needed the estrogen. Some women may have a bad response to it.
That's very interesting to hear you say that, because that would be so unknown to the majority of women that go to get HRT. They would just expect, both levels are really low. I need more of these. But as you said, it's like that seesaw effect with progesterone and estrogen. We need to find the right balance. Otherwise, one's really high, one's really low. And so much people are at a point of potentially higher estrogen because their progesterone is really low because of the poor sleep, the poor diet, all the things stressing out the body. So I think that's a really good thing to understand. Plus, looking at that visually, that series of events that happens to get into that place. And I think that's really helpful to the way you described it. Like if you take a step back and really look at the common things people are experiencing, and a lot of them are the body is struggling, the gut and the liver, to do their jobs. And we're trying to facilitate that that's easier to do. But again, it's like going against what modern society is. Like a lot of the solutions that is slowing down, buying really nutrient dense food. They're kind of nearly inaccessible things unless you really put your mind to them.
Yeah. And it just goes back to sort of the education around it, I think, as well. Just trying to get it a little bit more almost mainstream out there. There's a few people that still don't know, like we sort of said earlier, like what HRT actually does or why it's useful. Some are massively fully against it. Like we see doctors against it. Some people still think it can cause like cancers and things like that, when a lot of the research does show it obviously is a small percentage, but it tends to be more positive than negative sometimes. But I think you do need to sort of go in and know exactly where your body's at. And a lot of doctors will say, yes, your estrogen fluctuates throughout the month, your progesterone will change. But if you try and test in a specific time of your cycle, or like I said, do a Dutch test, for example, that is going to tell you all the information you need. And some women may have low levels of estrogen, for example. Add more estrogen in, we could find out that their body's completely rubbish at detoxing it. It's going down all the wrong pathways. So it's not going to help with any symptoms whatsoever.
Well, that's something a lot of people would never think of, your ability to actually use
the
what the
hormones.
HRT is
Yeah.
in the body.
Yeah, it is complex, and people think it is just a case of, I'm just going to put more estrogen in. But you could have woman A, you could have woman B, completely the same levels. Woman A could be amazing at, like I said, how our body actually uses it. Woman B could be completely rubbish, and it would have completely different effects, even though they've got that exact same sort of base level.
Yeah, because there is that perception still of people like, I just want to keep it natural. I don't want to put anything synthetic in the body, which is absolutely fair enough. But deeply understanding the pros and cons of it for your specific situation of a person that say, and there's a lot of women that experience like PMDD like symptoms in perimenopause for the first time, where it's the mental health piece that's really been affected by the change in progesterone and estrogen, we'll say. Then you really have to look at the pros and cons and say, okay, is it going to be effective for me? It probably is a scenario of trial and error as well, like you say, to even understand if it's going to work in your body. Because like you say, it's not everyone that can fully metabolize them.
Yeah, exactly. And every single woman, it will go down different pathways. Like obviously the PD and PMDD side of things, like tends to be like more of a psychological thing than sort of how our body's actually using the hormones, but it still has that sort of massive knock-on effect. They sort of cross over quite a lot. We know obviously if our progesterone is really low, we're going to be a lot more anxious, we're going to be a lot more stressed out. And a lot of women do get misdiagnosed with sort of what is that root cause of what is affecting them and why they're feeling like this or getting these conditions. Just reverting back to that's why I think testing is super important, because it can fully tell somebody where they are instead of sort of just guessing and putting that blanket approach over everyone.
Yeah, I think even when you look at PMDD as something like, for anyone that doesn't know what it is, maybe there's 1 or 2 weeks, maybe even more than that of the month, where you feel extremely low, maybe rage, it's very hard to function day-to-day life, because when there is the change in hormones with your cycle, it just impacts so many things in the body. But there is that idea of, okay, I'll just take antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds then weeks, but not really understanding there could be actually a whole host of things that lead you to get to that point that's happening. It's not necessarily one thing like, oh, my gut is in disarray, or, I'm too stressed. It's kind of like a lot of things. There's multiple things going on. And like you say, the testing is invaluable. So for somebody that does have access to testing, for extensive testing, what is usually the best place for them to start in terms of, like, say, it could be somebody that isn't experiencing anything significant, but they're like, okay, there's a bit of change going on. Is it something you should get done regularly if possible? You know, if you were a girl, let's say if you were a girl, what would you do when it comes to testing?
Yeah, I'd always sort of recommend sort of just a standard full panel to start off with, just to see where everything's at. So looking at like a full hormone panel, full thyroid panel, cholesterol, kidney, liver markers, inflammation as well, just so you get sort of like a good overview of exactly what's going on. We always recommend if a patient has PCOS or endometriosis or menopause or perimenopause, for example, then you do a little bit further testing in terms of maybe going along with sort of Dutch testing sort of route. Dutch testing is something that has been around in America for God knows how long. It is getting a little bit sort of mainstream over here. But again, it is an expensive test, so I wouldn't necessarily sort of say to somebody you 100% need that. I would start off with sort of just the basic blood testing to start off with, and that gives you a good idea on exactly where you're at. And if you are somebody that sort of does know their cycle, it obviously is nice to sort of get it tested at specific parts of your cycle. Obviously, if you don't have a cycle or you can't do that, obviously just testing it whenever you can is obviously a good option as well.
Well, that's really great to know. Yeah, because you do hear so much. A lot of what I did at the beginning was interpreting Dutch tests, because I had so many US clients and they had got the Dutch test. And, you know, like you say, there was no interpretation of it. So they spent a lot of money on this test and had no idea what the numbers meant. So
Yeah,
it's definitely now something you can see a lot more of, even in Europe. I think a lot of people would have heard of the term Dutch test comparing to even just 3 or 4 years ago. It definitely seems to be more known.
Yeah, it's definitely coming a lot more mainstream. And then you're right, like, if you just get that Dutch test right in front of you, it is super complicated. Like, there's so many diagrams and different numbers and different complicated words, and so you just wouldn't know where to start. But that's like what I say is, like, there's really no point getting a Dutch test unless you have somebody go over it with you.
Of course. And it's interesting as well when you even look at what's happened to gut health in the last few years. I've really noticed the approach to gut health has really changed from practitioners, because a lot of the time I would have had clients who had went to a gut health practitioner and went on an elimination diet, and then there was no reintroduction, and they were just told this is how it is long term. So I think there was definitely many years of people not having enough research or understanding or work with patients around gut health. So there was a gap in knowledge, and then a lot of people were trying to recover from that after many years of just saying, I'll just give up gluten and dairy, and also I'll give up X, Y, and Z. And then they're at a point where their gut is obviously really in a difficult situation, because it's not accustomed to certain food groups.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have the bacteria to digest that food. So it's like a catch-22.
Yeah, and it is something that you see massively online as well, like cut out gluten, cut out dairy, help reduce inflammation and that side of things. But I think people don't realize, like, inflammation is almost like an alarm bell that your body's sort of signaling out, rather than sort of the root cause of what's going on. So, like, you can cut out all these food groups, and again, same for the gut health side of things, but it's not something that's going to fix that root cause of why it actually started to get bad. And, like, there's no reason whatsoever why you can't reintroduce the foods once you do fix everything. It is something where you're not going to say to somebody, look, you can't eat gluten for the rest of your life. If you have a strong sort of good gut health, then it's something that you can easily fit back in.
A lot of people don't know that. I had a gut expert in my membership, and people were like, their jaws were on the floor, because she was saying, you know, for the majority, a large percentage, you can reintroduce all them foods that you've historically found really difficult to digest. And that was like, you know, news to a lot of people, because they really did think you're born with that, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, and there's loads of different restricted diets out there, isn't there? And people think they have to stay on them forever. They don't realize that it is just a short-term thing to sort of get everything back healthy again. And yeah, so many of our clients have come into the mindset of, I can't eat gluten, or I need to stay away from dairy and things like that, when as soon as you do a nice sort of step-by-step protocol and have that reintroduction phase, then there's really no reason whatsoever then you can't start introducing normal foods and sort of live normally.
I think understanding as well how much the gut is a systemic approach. Your gut isn't just, let's take a probiotic and change our food. You have to address sleep. You have to address your circadian rhythm. You have to address nervous system regulation. So the gut part is like really all encompassing. So if you're going to fix your gut, there's lots of things to do. And I think that was the piece a lot of practitioners were missing, thinking it was just maybe just the food element, for example.
Yeah, and even just on taking like a pro and prebiotic, like those are obviously good, but like if you haven't got rid of all the bacteria and done like a full-on like kill-off phase, for example, like they are pretty pointless in that sense. Like again, obviously it's why we say do the testing first, so you know exactly what order to do things, but you need to sort of look at what's going on in terms of the root cause and finding out exactly why it's happening, what's caused it, and as soon as you fix that and know how to do it long term, then it should be something that doesn't come back.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What would you say to that you wish a lot of your patients knew that would prevent a lot of the pieces of testing that they get back that are quite alarming? Is there any one thing that stands out that you and your team are like, wow, that could have been prevented?
I think just the under-eating is a massive one. I think under-eating causes a sort of a lot of issues that do have that knock-on effect. I think as soon as we start noticing like we said earlier, our metabolic system going out of loop, that's going to have a knock-on effect with every other system in our body. So as soon as our thyroid, like we sort of say the king of hormones effectively, right? Or queen. It's as soon as that starts messing up or going out of whack or going underactive, like it will have a knock-on effect with everything else in our body. So pile that with, again, what we alluded to earlier, like a lot of women will do everything in the household. So if they're under-eating, over-exercising, having to look after everybody, I think that is a major, massive cause of what we see a lot of the testing come back with problems. Just because so many guys and girls will stay in that calorie deficit for God knows how many years, and won't do like a back up to maintenance and reverse everything back up. And I think there's just so much misinformation out there where it is just people telling you to eat less, saying there's no science behind anything else, and sort of saying that anybody who tells you otherwise is stupid. But we've seen it with so many clients as well, where we have women where they literally are eating about 500 calories a day and going to the gym 5 days a week and just nothing is happening. So yeah, it is something where obviously calories in, calories out is an important factor, but you do need to look at everything else as well.
Yeah, because there definitely was that aggressive push the last few years of, the law of thermodynamics, stop crying, just eat less. And it's so interesting, the exact population now, the age group of perimenopause and menopause women, historically what happened globally meant they're in the prime position to not take care of themselves, put everyone else first, eat less, because that was drilled into them in the 80s, for example, or 90s. Skinny culture, that's the key. And they're left now at a point where it's very hard psychologically to change their behaviours, because the reverse diet piece, people I think all just put on weight. And I think that's like a really scary part, because people are almost feeling like liars. They're saying, but I don't eat very much. Like I really am not overeating.
Yeah.
And people are like, but you are. But actually you are. And the woman that's actually not is like, you feel like awful guilt and shame, because I did that for a good few years in my early 20s. I'm 6 foot tall. I was massively under eating. I was training 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. I was pretty lean, but at the same time finding life so difficult, and also thought, why am I even more lean? Like I'm doing so much and eating so little for the height I was and the output I was doing. And people were just like to me, I was like, yeah, I just want to lose the last, was I 10 pounds? And everyone was like, yeah, just pull in the calories. But my metabolic system was in absolute disarray.
Yeah, and it is just something where it is overlooked, and I think you'll get those individuals that sort of call women out for being a liar and saying you're obviously eating more than you're putting in MyFitnessPal or what have you. But yeah, I think there's a sort of just very sort of narrow-minded and maybe don't understand the female body as much as they should, working with women as well. I think as guys get it a lot easier in terms of trying to lose weight. Like we know we're going to burn more calories just for having higher muscle mass and obviously higher testosterone levels in general. So I think just trying to be that narrow-minded person in terms of saying you just need to go to the gym 7 days a week and eat 1,000 calories every single day, what have you, is just an approach that is hopefully getting phased out a little bit more as well.
I mean, that exact thing as well just stresses the body out even more. It drives the hunger hormones up even more. It's just such a recipe for disaster. The body feels in complete survival. It's not getting enough nutrients, rest, recovery. So I think that's an amazing place to end this podcast with, and such a lovely message for women to understand and to really take on board, because it can feel this really like a shame cycle. You're stuck in a shame cycle of trying to get the work. But as you say, the specifics for testing and for really understanding the nuance of this is really important. And where can people find you, Matt? Because no doubt people will want to have a look at your content. It's so informative.
Yeah, the Instagram handle is Rebalance Health _. And the website with all our different testing, so from blood testing to functional testing, is www.rebalance.health.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Matt. I really, really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Matt, thank you so much. That was really one of the most practical breakdowns of testing I've had. Everything Matt just described, from the blood sugar swings to the liver overload to the gut symptoms nobody can explain, all trace back to a nervous system that's stuck in fight or flight, survival or high alert. That's exactly what the Rebalance membership works through. My membership, which goes through one piece each month. So sleep, cortisol, blood sugar, gut health. One small daily action, because I know a lot of women I work with are already overwhelmed. We want simplicity. It's already decided for you, not another protocol you have to figure out on your own. The link is in the show notes, and thank you so much for listening. I'll see you in the next episode.